Mr. Secretary, thank you very much for joining us tonight. I know this is difficult to get into your schedule. We've had a week now since the memo of understanding came out. Nothing else has come out on paper establishing any other level of agreement between the United States and Iran. How would you compare what you've been able to read in that memo of understanding to what you were able to achieve in the agreement you negotiated with Iran?
Well, obviously, Lawrence, and first of all, thank you. I'm delighted to be here with you. It doesn't resemble anything close to what we had. It's basically an agreement that the Straits of Hormuz will be reopened. And by the way, they were never closed previously at any point in time. It had never been weaponized until now. And obviously, that's a dynamic that presents itself in a complicated way for the rest of the negotiations. But the agreement that we had was exhaustive. It was the strongest, most intrusive nuclear agreement ever negotiated. And it had the greatest detail of ways in which the IAEA, the International Agency for Atomics, for Nuclear, would have been able to pursue any questions at any point in time. It had inspections that were laid out with a methodology for exactly how those would go, exactly what the responsibilities of Iran were with respect to them. And all we have now is an agreement to negotiate something in the future. We really don't know what it might contain or not contain. Iran clearly has a newfound sense of power by virtue of having withstood the military assault that has taken place to date. And I think what many of us spoke about before the war started, I was actually in Florida with former Secretary Mike Pompeo. We did a joint appearance, and I was asked what we thought might occur. And I mentioned at that time, people need to be really careful in how they approach this, because Iran knows and understands and uses asymmetrical warfare as effectively as anybody on the planet. And that is exactly what we've seen play out here. So we're a long, long way, obviously, from having a genuine agreement. They are negotiating. All of what is going on, Lawrence, every bit of this back and forth, Switzerland, notice what somebody may or may not have said, where, in fact, the negotiations are, could have been avoided completely. All the president had to do was commit that he was prepared to negotiate for the changes that he really wanted as a result of Iran's behavior. And there was no sort of follow-on, or excuse me, not follow-on. There was no effort to put on the table something that said, look, here's what we really object to. These are the problems we have with this current agreement, and we're prepared to negotiate with you on that. That is a negotiation that never took place, never really took place in a fulsome way, because clearly the president really was anxious to join Prime Minister Netanyahu and bomb Iran. With, I might add, the false assumption that after weeks of being, after the Iranian people had gone out into the streets, to assume that they were going to come back out automatically and go through the loss of life that they went through as a result of that is really being presumptuous, and actually was a mistake.
In Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan's new book, Regime Change, they have a detailed account that is so accurate that the White House is accusing them of possibly having obtained tapes of White House meetings, but a detailed account of Bibi Netanyahu coming into the Situation Room to convince Donald Trump to launch this war. Is that the kind of pressure that you experienced from the Israeli government?
No. President Obama was importuned by Prime Minister Netanyahu to join in bombing Iran, and he asked for clearance by President Obama to go ahead and do that. President Obama said no and refused to partake in that, thought it was an enormous mistake. But taking on Iran in the way in which it has been taken on over the course of these last months has really been a goal of Prime Minister Netanyahu, an aspiration, a wish, if you will, for a long period of time. And he's spent quite a bit of his career really, constantly hammering the Iran card rather than heeding the Oslo Accords or trying to move forward on the peace front. And that's part of what has gotten us here.
There's a line in the Memo of Understanding about the nuclear material that Iran has managed to develop since Donald Trump abandoned the nuclear agreement that you negotiated that prevented them from developing that. And all it says is that Iran has agreed to resolve the disposition of stockpile enriched material pursuant to a mechanism that will be mutually agreed upon. That goes to your point about there's nothing agreed upon here. It's an agreement to continue to talk about the most difficult things, for example, the nuclear material.
That's correct. That's absolutely correct. And needless to say, there's some serious questions about what the word obliteration means, because allegedly the entire stock was obliterated several months ago and wouldn't have needed a rebombing. But we rebombed and got a new announcement about obliteration. But the bottom line remains that all of this could have been negotiated and should have been at least tried to be negotiated. You know, one of the obligations of the President of the United States is to make sure that if you're going to start losing the lives of young American service people, you need to be able to look the parents in the eye or a surviving spouse in the eye and say, we did everything possible to avoid having to do this. It is patently clear to everybody and anybody who looks at this closely, the president never did that. There was a rush to war here, a rush to a war of choice, a war which has discombobulated economies around the world, a war which has put the United States in a place of serious doubt about our bona fides, about our adherence to international law. And I think it's going to have long-term implications. It's not something we can't get beyond in the future, but it is startling. I happen to be in London right now where the climate challenges are being addressed. But I can tell you that what I hear from leaders throughout Europe and elsewhere where I've met with them is a real chink in the armor of the United States, which has worked so hard for so many years to establish a set of values by which we will operate. And that's really sad and really unnecessary to have put ourselves in this predicament. Moreover, the president went after this agreement from, I don't know, the minute he got in a campaign. I mean, this was sort of it was an Obama accomplishment, something President Obama wanted to do. And as we all know, that has motivated a lot of action by President Trump to sort of undo the Obama presidency, which he hasn't done. I think he's undone his own by virtue of the rush to military action here and by the credibility that he has lost on a global basis. And frankly, the annoyance that many, many people feel for the choices he has made, which have made life a lot tougher for a lot of people, not just in the United States, but around the world.